taken in the expansion draft. Now, she did not play with Indiana last season as she was overseas. She did not elect to come over, but she still technically was a part of the Indiana Fever's roster going forward. Her rights have been taken. Okay, and we also lost the Red Bomber, Chloe Bibby, who we all became.
Kristy Wallace and Chloe Bibby. Those are the two names Indiana just lost in the expansion draft. And before you think this doesn't matter, before you write this off as just losing bench players, we need to talk about what this really reveals about the Fever's strategy going into 2025. Because the players they chose to protect tell us everything about where this franchise is heading. Toronto Tempo grabbed Wallace, Portland Fire took Bibby, and on the surface, neither player seems like a devastating loss. Wallace didn't even play last season, stayed overseas instead of joining the team. Bibby dealt with injuries all year, barely got consistent minutes. So why does this matter?
And I believe she was taken by the Toronto Tempo, and we are going to get into all of that, man. Look, Indiana Fever, this is done. Y'all got to make the right decisions now. The Toronto Tempo, they did select Marina Mabrey. They took her off of the market. Julie Alleman from the LA Sparks. Aaliyah Nye from the Las Vegas Aces. Obviously, they got Kristy Wallace from the Indiana Fever. Okay, so they got some pieces, and we'll see how this team comes together.
Here's what makes Chloe Bibby's departure significant. She wasn't just another shooter on the roster. Watch how he describes her fit with Caitlin Clark. Pick and pop 4, corner spot-up shooter, somebody who could space the floor. That's not generic praise, that's identifying a specific skill set that complements a generational point guard. The Fever had an entire season to evaluate how Bibby worked in Clark's system. And despite injuries limiting her impact, the coaching staff saw enough potential to keep her on the roster through the offseason. But when it came time to protect players from the expansion draft, they made a choice. They left her exposed. That decision wasn't random. It was calculated.
And then here, you have someone who I felt would be a quality. You guys remember I was quoted as saying, and I put it in my video, that Bridget Carlton would be a good Kelsey Mitchell replacement if you were to lose her. Looks like that wouldn't be able to come to fruition, as she was the first pick in the draft. Bridget Carlton was the #1 pick in the expansion draft. Okay, she's going to be a building block for them. I also love the addition of Sarah Ashley Barker from the
Portland Fire's selections tell a fascinating story about what expansion teams value. Bridget Carlton went #1 overall in the expansion draft. Not a surprise, she's proven, she's versatile, she can score. But look at their other picks. Sarah Ashley Barker from the Sparks, Haley Jones, Emily Engstler. These aren't household names to casual fans. What Portland did was smart. They didn't chase aging stars or expensive contracts. They targeted young players buried on depth charts who haven't gotten real opportunities yet. Sarah Ashley Barker is 24 years old, barely played behind the Sparks' loaded roster. Now she's going to log serious minutes in Portland, get a chance to prove she belongs in this league. Compare that to Toronto's approach. Marina Mabrey as their marquee selection, an unrestricted free agent they'll have to pay to keep. Kristy Wallace, who hasn't played stateside in over a year. Different strategies, different risk profiles.
Be sure that because they were picked so high, these teams are going to give them the most money that they can get outside of any other team. And that's just where it would be. Each team was allowed to select one potential free agent. All right. So that is what went down in the expansion draft. And now it's time, man. The Indiana Fever have to figure out how they're going to put this roster together now. Okay. You lost 2 players, which I don't really think it's a huge deal.
Now we get to the real issue. Listen to the frustration in his voice when he talks about last offseason. Natasha Howard talking about winning. Temi Fagbenley, Odyssey Sims, players brought in because of relationships with head coach Stephanie White, not because they fit the system. That's the brutal truth about Indiana's 2024 roster construction. It wasn't built around Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. It was built around veteran relationships and established names who expected certain roles. And when those expectations collided with the reality of building around a rookie point guard, the entire season became dysfunction. The numbers back this up. Indiana started 1-8, before things finally clicked. They had the talent to make the playoffs, barely squeaked in as the 6th seed, despite having the Rookie of the Year and one of the league's best young centers. That's not a talent problem. That's a roster construction problem.
I mean, Kristy Wallace was a non-factor. I don't think they had a real interest in bringing Chloe Bibby back though. But it'll be interesting to see what they do this offseason going forward, man. Because last offseason was a debacle. Okay, it was bad. The way they put the roster together, going and getting people who were talking about winning MVP like Natasha Howard and just stuff like that. It was ridiculous, man. Last season was absolutely ridiculous, and it cannot happen again. What happened last year cannot happen again under any circumstance. Under any circumstance.
Kelsey Mitchell. That's the name that should terrify Fever fans right now, because she's an unrestricted free agent, and Indiana has a massive decision to make. Do you pay her what she's worth on the open market? Do you let her walk and replace her production? Do you try to work out a sign and trade? Here's the complication. Mitchell averaged 19.2 points per game last season. She's been Indiana's most consistent scorer for years. She and Caitlin Clark developed legitimate chemistry by the end of the year. That backcourt pairing was finally clicking in the playoffs. Losing that continuity would hurt, but Mitchell is going to command serious money. Multiple teams have cap space and need scoring guards. The Sparks just lost players in the expansion draft. They've got room. Dallas has been rebuilding for years. They'll throw money at proven talent. And Mitchell knows this might be her last chance to get paid before the league's economics shift again with the new CBA negotiations coming. Indiana can't afford to overpay. Not with Aaliyah Boston's extension coming up, not with Caitlin Clark's second contract on the horizon. Every dollar matters when you're trying to build a championship window around 2 franchise cornerstones under 25 years old.
Let's take a look, man. Caitlin Clark had a clip where she sat down and talked about what it means to play in Indiana. Let's take a look at this clip real quick here.
I think growing up, I had a lot of really good coaches. Whether that was when I was really young, my dad was my first ever coach, and getting to see him not only as my dad, but as my basketball coach.
That clip reveals something important about Caitlin Clark's mindset. She's talking about perspective, about basketball not being everything, about having balance in her life, and that maturity matters when you're trying to build a team culture from scratch. Because here's what Indiana needs to do this offseason. They need to find players who understand their roles in Clark's system, not veterans looking for one last payday, not former all-stars expecting touches they aren't going to get. They need shooters who are comfortable spotting up. They need defenders who can switch. They need high basketball IQ players who make the right read when Clark draws 2 defenders. The expansion draft was the easy part. Losing Kristy Wallace and Chloe Bibby doesn't fundamentally change this roster, but the decisions coming next, those are the ones that will define whether Indiana becomes a contender or wastes another year of Caitlin Clark's rookie contract.
First, it was putting everything before that, whether it was school, whether it was taking care of yourself, whether it was getting along with my siblings. Like, that's just how I was raised. It was never basketball, basketball, basketball. And as a kid, that's probably what you want it to be, is just be sports all the time. That's certainly what I wanted, but it was everything else, and I think that's helped me a lot. As I'm a professional athlete, you realize, like, this isn't everything to you, right? It's what you get to do, and it helps you make a living, but it's not your all. And I think, like, as I moved into college, my college coach, Coach Woodard, is going to be in the Hall of Fame one day. She's a tremendous coach, but I get asked this a lot, and I say this, like, you know, like mentors, but I also feel like I have a lot of really, really good teammates that I was able to learn from. And maybe you don't always like to look at a teammate as somebody that's like a mentor, but for me, I feel like I did. Like, I had great captains on teams that I was on, whether it was my first time in the league or whether when I was the first showed up at Iowa. So I feel like I've had a lot of tremendous teammates that have helped me kind of flourish and kind of learn the game and learn each other and build different relationships. I'd say that.
Right, man. So that's what Caitlin Clark had to say from the Final Four. But hey, Indiana Fever have lost Chloe Bibby and Kristy Wallace. Get down in the comments. Let me know what you got.
So let's talk about what Indiana's front office needs to do right now. Not next month, not after free agency starts, right now. First, the Kelsey Mitchell situation has to get resolved. You cannot go into the offseason not knowing if your starting shooting guard is coming back. Either commit to paying her market value or start working trade scenarios to get assets in return. Letting her walk for nothing would be organizational malpractice. Second, they need to identify exactly what skill sets complement Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. And this is where last season's mistakes become instructive. Natasha Howard was supposed to be a veteran presence, ended up being a bad fit who couldn't space the floor. Temi Fagbenle was supposed to provide interior defense, barely played meaningful minutes. Those weren't talent evaluation failures, those were system fit failures. What does Clark need? She needs floor spacers who can knock down threes at a high percentage. She needs cutters who move without the ball. She needs defenders who can guard multiple positions so the team can switch everything and keep Clark from getting hunted on defense. Those aren't complicated requirements, but they require discipline in roster construction. Third, and this is crucial, they have to get younger. Look at the teams that made deep playoff runs last season. New York had a balanced roster with veterans and young talent. Minnesota had a core in their prime. Connecticut had experience but also athletic wings who could defend. Indiana's roster was too old, too slow, too reliant on players past their athletic prime. The expansion draft actually helps with this. Losing Chloe Bibby opens a roster spot. Kristy Wallace was never coming back anyway. That's 2 spots to target players who fit the timeline. Draft picks, undrafted free agents, international players who can contribute immediately. Get younger, get more athletic, get players who are hungry to prove themselves rather than protecting past accomplishments. Fourth, the coaching staff needs to establish a clear offensive identity. Last season was chaos. Sometimes they played fast, sometimes they slowed it down. Sometimes they ran sets for Clark, sometimes they tried to feature Mitchell or Boston. That inconsistency killed them early in the year. Stephanie White has to decide what this team is going to be offensively and commit to it from day one of training camp. The blueprint exists. Look at what Dallas did building around Arke Ogumboa. Look at how Las Vegas constructed their roster around Arke Wilson. Look at how Seattle developed their system around Jewel Lloyd and Skylar Diggins-Smith. Successful WNBA teams have an identity. They know who they are, and every roster move reinforces that identity. Fifth, they need to address the depth chart at power forward. With Chloe Bibby gone, with Natasha Howard likely leaving in free agency, that position is wide open. And it's critical in Indiana's system because that 4 has to be able to shoot, has to be able to defend, has to be able to make quick decisions in the short roll when Clark gets doubled. The draft might provide an answer. There are several college forwards who fit that profile coming out this year, but Indiana picks 10th. They're not getting a top-tier prospect, so they'll have to get creative. Maybe it's a trade. Maybe it's a free agent signing. Maybe it's developing somebody already on the roster who hasn't gotten an opportunity yet. What makes this offseason fascinating is that Indiana has all the leverage in the world when it comes to attracting free agents. You get to play with Caitlin Clark. You get to play in front of sold-out crowds every night. You get national television exposure. You get a chance to be part of something special. That's the pitch. That's what should bring players to Indianapolis, even if the money isn't the absolute highest offer. But they have to be selective. They can't just sign names because they're available. They can't bring in players who need the ball in their hands to be effective. They can't add veterans who are going to complain about playing time when they're not starting. The culture has to be about winning, about sacrifice, about fitting into a system designed to maximize the talents of a generational point guard. The expansion draft revealed that Indiana's front office is willing to make tough decisions. They protected the players they believe in and let others go. That's a good sign. It means they have a plan. It means they're not being sentimental about roster construction. Now they have to execute the rest of it. Sign the right free agents, make the right draft picks, build the right culture, because the window is open right now. Caitlin Clark is on a rookie contract for 3 more years. Aaliyah Boston is locked in long-term. This is the time to go all in, to build a championship contender, to take advantage of having 2 franchise players before the salary cap realities make it impossible to keep everyone together. So here's the question for Fever fans. Do you trust this front office to get it right? Because last offseason was a disaster. The Natasha Howard signing, the DeWanna Bonner contract, the lack of shooting, the age of the roster, all of it went wrong. But they have a chance to fix it. They have cap space, they have draft picks, they have the most attractive destination in the league for free agents who want to win. The expansion draft was just the beginning. The real work starts now. And if Indiana gets this offseason right, if they build the roster correctly around Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, they won't just make the playoffs next year, they'll be legitimate title contenders. But if they repeat last year's mistakes, if they prioritize names over fit, if they build another disjointed roster that takes half the season to figure itself out, they'll waste another year of their championship window. What do you think Indiana should do with Kelsey Mitchell? Should they pay her whatever it takes to keep her, or let her walk and use that money elsewhere? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you subscribe, because we're going to be breaking down every move this offseason as the Fever try to build a championship roster around the future of this league.